we're being forwarded emails from the lenders, and it's them that are driving a compliance certificate to demonstrate the system's compliant. There is no such thing. I keep seeing this banded around on the bloody internet. There is no such thing as a compliance certificate. So if they are sized appropriately for the property it serves, they should be emptied every 6 to 8 weeks. They can be anything up to £500-600 per empty. So if you multiply that by 8 or 9 empties a year, crazy expensive.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Complete Agent Podcast, where each week we get together to talk all things estate agency. I'm James Kendall, and I'm joined by my industry colleagues Ian Storey and David Warburton, my good friends as well. We also have a very special guest who we'll introduce shortly as well. As we do always, lads, how's your week been? Let's go to you first, Mr. Prepared, Dave Warburton.
Did you just forget your name, by the way, then?
Do you know what? I was trying to remember what you say, and I was trying not to do it in your voice. Hi, guys. Complete Agent Podcast. David here. Go on, mate.
Yeah, mixed week. I say it's a mixed week. It's just a challenging week, I would say. I think we had a quick chat before we came on. I'm just finding that chains are a nightmare at the minute. It's always good, like, when you build a chain, isn't it? Like, you've got control of it. But then when one falls apart, it's a killer. Yeah. It can be a killer because you can have 3 or 4 big fees at risk. And we've had that in the last week. We've got 2 in particular where it's so frustrating, but it's normal in the industry. You'll both be able to relate to this, but we've literally got 2 chains where one party right at the start of the process said, we will break the chain and go into rented.
That'll classic.
And then right towards the end, one is due to complete in early July. The guy's not found at the top of the chain, has said all along that he will break the chain, and lo and behold, gets to the close to the completion time and goes, "No, I won't break the chain. I need to find something to buy because I've now realised it's going to cost me more than I thought, and I don't want to do that." And we've had another one, very very similar, just taken an age to try and find something. Said they'll go into rented. The rental's never perfect, and it's just a nightmare. So it's putting. There's one of those chains will probably fall apart. I think we'll probably just about rescue the other one. And then again, I told you another one, an absolute classic, where we had a property due to complete last Monday, and the Friday when it was supposed to exchange, something happened at the solicitors with the buyer's side, I believe, and it got delayed. So they said, "All right, no problem, we'll do it on Monday." And on Sunday, the seller emailed me to say, my job's at risk of redundancy. There's no way I can complete. And on Monday, it all fell apart.
Oh, my God.
They're all boxed up, ready to move. This woman's in tears. Oh, absolute nightmare. So, yeah, a bit of a drag in that respect. But, with all the negatives, there's always positives around the corner, isn't there? We got a cash offer on a £1.6 million house the other day. I've got a couple of others in my head. I've not got my stats in front of me, actually, so totally unprepared as I came on the pod this morning. But, it's felt like a mixed week. But actually, when you look at everything, you get a great offer in on a house like that. I've picked up a couple of brilliant listings this week as well. One that's at 2 million. I went to an amazing house yesterday at 1.5. I think I've got that one. So on the whole, all good. But just the usual roller coaster of a estate agency. Playing out as it always does, but on the whole, cannot complain. What about you, Ian?
Well, very similar, really, to you. I'll keep it fairly brief. We had 2 fallers yesterday, one at $1 million, one at 800 grand. So like 35 grand in fees gone out the pipeline. I've got. I said this last week, really, but I'm at the stage where we've got so many lovely listings on the market, but it just feels like we've not had that many sales. And you're like, oh God, we really need to fucking sell a few houses. But then just this week, out of the blue, second viewing on one at 1.3. I've got 3 proceedable viewings today on one at 2.15. We're on target to do our half. By the end of Q2, we should do half of the bonus pot for the year. So we're on. So really, when you look at everything, everything's good, really. And you've got to remind yourselves that it's not about the individual sales, is it? Because they'll always come and go. It's about the bigger picture.
Of course it is. And do you know what, as well, we talked about it at the start of the year, and it's really important when you do your planning, because I think Well, I've come across a lot of estate agents who've made the mistake of they target the number of instructions and sales in the same bracket, and it just doesn't work that way. You've got to basically factor in your withdrawal rate. You've got to factor in your fall through rate, so that when these tough times come around, you're not worried about them. No. It's not nice, and it's not nice for the people that are involved in these changes, certainly the ones that are affected with the actual move. But as the business owner and running the estate agency, you've just got to factor it in. It's as simple as that. So when they do fall, I am annoyed, but I've got to a point in my career where the mindset is all right.
Yeah, it's water off a duck's back, really. I mean, early on in the process of the business, if it was a 20 grand fee that had fallen through, you'd be like, "Fuck, nightmare." But when you get to the stage where your average fees are really, really good, then those things you just got to take it off. You got to take it as water off a duck's back. What the key thing is keeping the client happy. So the one at $1 million that fell through, we thought it was going to fall through. We could sense that was going to happen because there'd been a flood in the area, and there's a few things we thought, I bet they're going to pull out. So alongside Michelle, we made it clear to the client that we were on their side. So we put a plan in place with them in case it fell through. So we said to them, Joan, if this happens, we hope it doesn't, but if this happens, we're going to retake the photographs because the leaves are on the trees now. We're going to X, Y, Z. And she was like, okay, brilliant. And then when it fell through, I said, oh God, I'm very sorry to hear that, Joan. I'm glad we got that backup plan in place. So she really knows that we're on her side. So doing that sort of thing is very, very important to keep the client happy.
Just quickly on that as well, like I do think, without going too deep on it, the team target that you've got is really good, because it gets everyone invested in your team. It's not all about Ian Storey getting this and the other. Everyone in your team has one goal to head towards. So, people doing progression, people doing photographs, people doing marketing, all the way to people doing the viewings, etc. Everyone's getting a share of that bonus, aren't they?
Yeah, everyone's getting an equal share as well. So it does work really well, it does work really well.
And I'll cap my week off quickly, and then we can jump into our guest who's very patiently waiting for us to talk about our weeks. To be fair, chaps, I've had a similar week in terms of fall throughs and challenges. We haven't had anything fall through yet, touch wood. But again, it is chains, and it is that old classic. I'm going to move out into rented, and I'm going to break the chain, and no, I'm not. There's been a few of those that have happened, and when you've got 3 in the chain, and we've got one at like 450, one at 650, and then one at 1.4, all in the same chain. And just the dynamics of personalities and clashes. Sometimes I'm always glad sometimes we've got control of that, because you're not at the mercy. I'm in one chain at the moment where the agent is just one of those classic agents that goes, well, just let the solicitors get on with it. There's no chat, no communication or help at all. So, but on the whole, we've got some really good listings on. I think I sent the picture in the WhatsApp group with the members yesterday. Really nice place in the countryside that we were doing a shoot for yesterday. That's my favourite part of the job. I think sometimes the shoot day when the stylist has been in and like you're there with a photographer, videographer, etc., and it's all good to go. So
yeah, I love that part of the job. Yeah, do you know what? Just on that, JK. I've thought that to myself a few times recently. Obviously we all love the listing and the selling, but creating the marketing is amazing. But to be able to enjoy that and have that, like yesterday we did a shoot on a £2.5 million house. We were there 4 hours. The sun was shining. Me and Mark were around the lake doing this. It was just amazing. But I keep telling myself that to have those enjoyable moments, you've got to have the shit. You've got the shit will come as well. You can't have one and not the other, can you?
That segues nicely.
That was almost scripted. That was amazing.
Yeah.
Speaking of the shit coming.
Yeah.
Hello, James Warburton.
So today we're diving into a subject that's often overlooked, but absolutely vital if you're selling rural or semi-rural high-end homes. Off-main sewage. So whether it's septic tanks, cesspits, modern treatment plants. This is an area where the wrong advice can sometimes cost a deal or lead to major legal issues down the line. Today, we're delighted to be joined by James Warren of Off Mains Solutions, a true specialist in the field who's built a thriving business around helping homeowners, buyers and estate agents navigate the complexities of private drainage systems. James, welcome to the podcast.
Can I just interject? JK, was that a chat GPT introduction?
Yeah.
No.
I love the way you'd learned that off by heart as well. You weren't looking down.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
No, definitely not. Definitely
No, it
not.
didn't sound scripted at all.
Not at all.
So well done.
Fantastic.
Well,
Thank you.
Can I jump in? You're all talking about chains, and we're very much on the periphery of these transactions. But just this week, we've gone back probably a little bit in time in a bad way, that we've had a lot of 11th hour requests for surveys within 2 weeks of a proposed exchange. And that's been the pressure on. So when you're talking about chains, I'm sure it's not because there's a problem with the drainage system, but in our world, we have to really rush to get out and rush to get the report ready, but we won't know what the outcome will be until the engineers attended. And that might be peace of mind and fantastic news, or it could be dreadful news because it might be a whole system replacement. And then suddenly someone's got to find 15, 20,000 to put aside or renegotiate the price. So that's, I suppose, our involvement in a transaction, a tiny proportion of you gents, but we are still, when you talk about chains collapsing, we're very aware that we may be part of that issue at times.
So should we start with your background then? So how did you get into this sector? And
James, why are you smiling when you ask that?
Because I'm thinking to myself, I'm trying to keep this profesh without loads of puns. The puns are just coming into my head.
You're the
lads will know what I'm like.
You are the worst.
I am the worst. I am the most immature by far.
It comes to the name.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. So sorry, I completely. My head's just full of puns now. Anyway, so how did you get into this? And obviously Off Mains is your business. Off Mains Solutions is your business. What's kind of your background? Where did you start? And then what we'll do is we'll get into some of the detail and some of the questions, etc.
I'll run through it really quickly because I'm older than you gents. From college doing construction engineering, I somehow found myself working for Norwich Union, which is now Aviva, so I'm showing my age immediately. I used to look at underground service insurance claims. So in my early days, I just had to find out about drainage systems and how they worked, more importantly, how they failed, the interpretation of insurance policy wording. I've always been really boring. As you can
get
tell,
on really well with Dave, actually.
I knew it. I knew Dave and I would get on. And then I worked for a couple of national drainage companies, and then I had a silly idea that has no relevance at all, that before I was 30, I wanted to start my own company. So I left a really well-paid job when I was 29 and a half and started my first business. And yeah, that was 19 years ago. So this company is only in its second year, but I've been doing off-main, so private drainage or off-grid, whatever everyone wants to label it. I've been doing this exclusively for over 20 years. So this is completely my bag. There are other players in the market, of course, but I've really drilled down into only doing off-mains drainage because there are so many offshoots of it, and property transactions is a huge part of the business, but it's certainly not the only part. So really, I've I suppose used all my 27 years in employment per se to reach this point where hopefully my skills and my team skills are relevant to people that occasionally come across a private drainage system. So
have you found that this kind of niche has grown in demand over time? So like with legislation changing in sort of rural property trends, etc. Have you found it's grown, or?
I think awareness has absolutely grown since 2015 when the new regulatory reform came in, which I'm sure we'll touch a little bit later. But yeah, I don't know if it's anything to do with me or the regulation. I've spent the last 10 years since that regulation's introduction to hammer home the importance of getting these systems checked, because not only can they be painful financially, they're painful to the environment. And as much as we're all in it to make a few pounds, I do genuinely care about the environment. Part of this, the whole reason for the regulatory reform is to protect our waterways and the greater, wider environment. So what we do isn't just to earn a few quid, it's to make sure that the substratas are protected as much as possible, and we're reducing phosphate and all the nasties that go into our waterways. You know, the water companies get all the bad press for their massive spills, but if you were to total up all the individual domestic illegal spills, it will probably add up to the same volume, but that gets no press whatsoever. So to me, if we can just sort them out one property, one discharge at a time, then we can sleep easy knowing that we've done our bit to help.
So should we start really basic then? So for agents and homeowners that aren't quite sure, what's the difference between a septic tank, a cesspit, and a sewage treatment plant?
Can I go back one stage if I can be
Yeah, go for it.
Because a lot of people, some people say they don't even know what system they're on, whether they go to the main sewer, whether they've got a tank, which is a good starting point. But effectively, if you're paying sewerage rates to a local water company, then you're on mains, or you should be, unless there's a horrible admin error somewhere. So private off-mains drainage, as you say, septic tanks, treatment plants, cesspits. Cesspits are just huge, watertight holding tanks. They fill up. They need to be emptied. They have no outlet. They don't discharge anywhere. They're just holding tanks. So if they are sized appropriately for the property it serves, they should be emptied every 6 to 8 weeks. They can be anything up to £500-600 per empty. So if you multiply that by 8 or 9 empties a year, a cesspit, although perfectly legal as a drainage provision, crazy expensive, ridiculously expensive, and they're not liked by building control or environmental regulators, because if ever there's a structural breach, you've got untreated effluent going straight to ground. They'll hit an aquifer, they'll find a surface water, and it's going to be pollution. So we've only installed 2 in the last decade. So they're almost a dead duck now, cesspits.
I had no idea. Do you know what? I had no idea that they were still being installed so recently. I wouldn't have thought that.
They're really hard to install because they are physically massive. So you need a lot of available footprint in a property. You then need to prove to the Environment Agency and Building Control that you've done all the checks and measures to prove that no other drainage system can be installed. And if you can demonstrate that, then as a last resort, you'll be allowed to install a cesspit.
And why would someone choose to put a cesspit in?
They wouldn't.
So why? So you've installed 2 in 10 years. What?
It's where you've got no other choice. It's normally in a situation where an existing system has failed, where there's a very small garden, there's no main sewer anywhere near, the ground is not dissipating anymore, it's lost all its percolation value, there's no ditches or streams to discharge into, so you've just got a bit of land to play with. You can squeeze in a cesspit, and then you can tick a box to say you've got a legal provision of drainage. But it is a absolute last resort option.
Yeah, it's a rarity.
So then, septic tank, then, and sewage treatment plant. What are those?
Septic tank, again, it's an underground tank. Normally 1, 2, or 3 chambers. There's no moving parts. Septic tanks work on displacement. So you put in 100 litres, 100 litres gets pushed out the back end. Septic tanks can only discharge to ground. Historically, there's some very naughty, many systems that naughtily discharge to a surface water, which is what this new reform is here to sort out. But effectively, a septic tank will take all the grey and foul water from a property. When it's quiet, when it's calm, when no one's using the facility, something called natural separation occurs. This is so gross, I'm sorry. During the night, for example, all the dense matter will fall to the bottom and create something called a sludge layer. The fat, oil, grease, and rags naturally rise to the top and create a crust layer. And the bit in the middle is just effectively dirty water, but all the solids should have been removed. That's allowed to go through to the next chamber, and it gets slightly cleaner again. No treatment, just slightly cleaner as it separates. And then the middle section is allowed to discharge out of that septic tank, and it will go to some sort of soakaway arrangement where the treatment will occur in that soakaway. Natural bugs grow in and around the soakaway, and it gets treated as it falls under gravity. Again, it will find an aquifer and it will get away. So septic tank should only discharge to ground. A sewage treatment plant is effectively, if we go back, say, 60 years, and I will be quick, if you had a Rolls-Royce treatment system, you'd have a septic tank, something called a clinker bed or a filter bed that would be treatment. Then there'd be a natural reed bed system, and then it would be legally allowed to discharge to a watercourse. A modern sewage treatment plant has all of those different component parts built into one shell. You just have different compartments within one asset, and you have electricity allowing oxygen to be introduced inside a sewage treatment plant. So all the treatment, all the biomass, all the good bugs, all of that takes place inside the sewage treatment plant. So what you have leaving the sewage treatment plant is treated effluent. So it's clear, it's odorless, but it's not 100% pure. So you can't use it. You can't even use it to retain for watering the flowers in the garden. But you are legally allowed to discharge to many options. You can go to a free-flowing watercourse, a seasonal watercourse, a soakaway, whether that's a drainage field or a deep one. You can go an above-ground drainage mound. There are loads more legal options for the owner to discharge. Some may need a permit. We can go into that a little bit later. But because you can only now discharge to ground from a septic tank, more and more treatment plants are getting installed because it gives the owners more options as to where they can legally discharge it to. So I would say, if we were to have this chat in 15 years, I would say we'd be talking about septic tanks the way we're talking about cesspits now. I think they'll become a thing of the past, and nearly every situation will demand a treatment plant because the regulations are getting tighter. There's something called nutrient neutrality around the country at the moment. There's 28 local authorities that, because they have to build new houses, they need to create tokens. To create tokens to sell to builders, they need to put in these low phosphate sewage treatment plants for nutrient neutrality. We're involved in one at the moment, and that's the way developers are getting their ticket to build new houses. So I think you can't achieve that with a septic tank. You can only achieve that with a top of the range sewage treatment plant. So that's why I think as the years go by, cesspits will be gone, septic tanks will be gone, and they're all going to be treatment plants.
So talking about new homes there then, so quite often when we come up against this, there can be older homes. So in an older system, how can we identify, because I think one of the things we discussed off air is any systems that are sort of pre-1983, what are the risks and obligations that come with an older system like that?
Well, actually, the older systems are typically built very, very well. So the issue with the 1983, when the general binding rules were released in 2015 by DEFRA and the Environment Agency, it was very specific that 1983 was a big ticket item because that's when the first British standard for the treatment of wastewater was introduced. So effectively, pre-1983 systems they don't have to adhere to modern regulations because that would be very unfair to retrospectively apply new regs. So effectively, pre-83 systems are normally block, brick, concrete, very well built, very structurally sound, but if they discharge to a watercourse, they're still non-compliant. A 1983 system, if it's discharging to ground and it's a very Heath Robinson bespoke soakaway, but it's still working, that system does not have to be brought up to current regs. The owner does not have to pay £15,000, £20,000 to put in a modern system because that is still compliant. And the issue with 83 is that a lot of people don't understand the importance of it. So they might just say, oh, we can demonstrate it was installed in 1955, therefore a new system is needed. Well, it might be needed, but until it's checked, you don't know. So it's absolutely, and this isn't a sales pitch for me. It's an awareness for as soon as it's identified that it's an off-mains drainage system, irrespective of the age of the system, it really must be inspected to ascertain what it is, where it is, if it's working, is it compliant, does it need to be changed, what are the cost implications, and the quicker that can be done in the property transaction, the better. In case there is an issue and then needs time to either install a new system or at least renegotiate the price.
And then, so another thing I've heard about quite a bit, and I'm not really sure what it is, and I'm sure you'll jump in here, but I keep hearing about a 30-metre rule. What's that?
The 30-metre rule, if a new off-mains drainage system is required, but there is a foul public sewer within 30 metres of any part of the site boundary, then an application must be made to that water provider to create a new sewer connection. They don't have to accept. Then we've had many situations where the water company have already reached capacity, and that's fine. As long as you create an audit trail to prove that you have approached them, that's fine. More times than not, they will accept it, and then that property will move from an off-mains drainage system to being an on-mains drainage system, and they will then have to start paying sewage rates. But it's all to do with the 30 metre. And if there's a communal system, so 3 properties share a septic tank, it fails, but there's a new sewer, say 55 metres away, that still counts. It's 30 metres per property. So on a combined system, you're looking for a foul sewer 90 metres from any part of any of the 3 site boundaries. And that's a really important one because a lot of main sewers are, in fact, that close. So that's a consideration as well.
So, James, with sort of surveys and things like that, I mean, I always think that, I mean, our conveyancing system's just so outdated and slow, and we're behind other countries. And obviously, it's better for a vendor to be fully prepared, I think, with everything if they can. You know, I always recommend things like the basics, you know, electrical certificates, gas certificates. You're going to get asked for it. Why not just get ready in advance? And obviously, I think good agents will get things filled out before. You're going to say yes, but obviously the benefits to it. Do you think somebody selling a property, a rural home with septic tanks, etc., like that, should produce a proper full report on the system before they actually go on the market?
I need to say, because this is being recorded, that we have not talked about this before, but that is the best question ever because I completely agree. The general binding rules, if you go on the government website, it absolutely stipulates that the seller must provide a certain amount of information. There's 5 bullet points, and the only way a seller can do that is to instruct an inspection themselves. But on the flip side of that, when we did our own analysis of the surveys we carry out, 95% of them are commissioned by the purchaser.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter what the government website says. I personally 100% agree with you. If I was selling a property, I would want to be on the front foot. I wouldn't want a 11th hour report coming in from Joe Blogs around the corner saying you need to give me a 20 grand reduction on the price. But nothing's changed in the last 10 years. It's always remained 19 out of 20 purchasers of properties carry out the survey. Yeah. And I don't think that's going to change. But I'm with you, Dave. I think the seller should 100% be on the front foot and be in control of providing that information.
Is it? Am I able to ask the kind of costings involved? I'm not saying you should have to give any costs away, but a range maybe of what it might cost a seller just to get a basic survey done on their system to say, yeah, it's all working fine as it should be, blah, blah, blah.
Well, I honestly don't know anyone else's prices for a standard survey inspection. If you phoned up today, we are £615 plus VAT. Mm-hmm. So no idea how that compares to others, and thankfully I have no interest because we're very busy, so we must be pricing it okay. That allows for, this isn't sales pitch again, that allows for the asset important to be checked and the discharge to make sure we can demonstrate our conclusion of whether it's compliant or not.
But it could save you money in the long run. I think that's the thing. When you're talking about the upper end of the market, if you're talking about a 2-bedroom cottage or something like that that's worth 200 grand, then they're probably going to balk at 600 quid. But when you're selling places at 800 grand, sometimes 3.5 million, like they don't care. They just want to get it done. And sometimes I always like, and I talk about it on the pod before, I sometimes like to do what's called a pre-mortem. For every house I put on the market. So look at everything that could possibly go wrong before we go to market. So what if it's an older property and it clearly needs work? Well, if it's a grade 2 listed, right? Well, is there regs for this? Is there consent for this? If, for example, in this situation, you've got a septic tank, you've got a cesspit. Has this been checked? These kind of things that people need to know about before you go to market, because as we just touched on a few minutes ago, when you get to 2 weeks before exchange and the buyer's commissioning a report and everyone wants to exchange, and there's pressure on, then all of a sudden, you then find out there's an issue and, the pipes have eroded and they're cracking and the whole system needs replacing. Yeah. It's a big deal. Whereas, if you invest a little bit in the beginning, you could lose 25, 30, 40 grand later on down the line if someone's holding you to ransom for exchange. Whereas, if you're doing a sort of pre-check when you bring the property to market, you know what you're in for. So you can sort of provide the rubber stamp, so to speak, and say, we are compliant. Or equally, if you're not, then there's an issue you can get sorted throughout the process before it actually gets to the time when you actually need it most.
Yeah. I've always said that we're speaking the same language. I just don't understand why a seller wouldn't want to retain that control. Like you say, it's not as if they're going to spend 20,000 and physically have a new system installed before the property's purchased, but to be in control, to say, well, this is why I've gone in at this price for the property because I know you're going to have to spend 20 grand. It's just, yeah, I don't understand any scenario where you're potentially inviting that 11th hour issue. And it will be, we see it firsthand. It is an issue when we're invited in late. Sometimes even when there's no problems, the fact that we've been asked to come because they think at that point in the transaction, there's no more expenditure. There's no more worry about what someone might find when they attend. And then suddenly we're thrown in the lion's den and we just keep our fingers crossed that we don't find any issues. But we normally do, not because we're searching for work, because unfortunately things have changed and systems do go wrong and they are too small and there is rainwater connected, which is not allowed to. So sometimes a system might be, inverted commas, working well. Well, all that means in the real world is that it's not blocking up. It might not be working, as in it might not be environmentally friendly. There might be some non-compliant issues that are not visible to the naked eye, but when you do the inspection, you find it. So yeah, jump on the front foot, be proactive, be in control, and have that report ready for any potential purchaser. It seems like common sense to me.
So here's a question for you. Sorry, Dave, do you going to jump in?
No, I just got to reinforce that point. I just think it should be normal, and it really. I mean, we'll talk about these fall throughs that we're struggling with at the minute. Just the potential chains that are collapsing. It's not always stuff that is avoidable, but there have been many occasions in the past where things just haven't been done. Listen, we could just go down a rabbit hole here, but I think properties should be surveyed. Everything should be done before it goes to the market, and everything should be available to the buyer to see. I just think that'd be the most obvious thing. But stuff like this, it is in your control when you go out to meet the homeowner, and understanding what James is saying and having a very basic understanding of it, I think will set you apart as well. So obviously, James, this is a podcast where we give a lot of advice and we talk to estate agents about winning instructions, conversion, all that sort of stuff. And just having this basic knowledge of how they work and operate and the potential pitfalls of it, but recommending these surveys up front, to me as well, it's another layer to stand you out from your competition, if that makes sense.
Completely agree.
And you're quite right with what you said, JK. The higher end of the market in particular, if you're selling a £1.5 million farmhouse that's on a septic tank, and you said to them, look, I'd strongly recommend that you get a survey done. It's going to cost you in and around £600 to do it, plus that. But at the end of it, we'll know exactly what your system is up to, whether it's right, and we're going to avoid any potential pitfalls in the future. I just cannot see anybody looking back and going, I'm not doing that. Buyer can do it. I know it's working well. You'll get the odd one, of course, but at that end of the market where you're living in a £1.5 million house or something like that, it's not a massive outlay, and actually it's probably an investment in the conveyancing process in a way, because it'll speed things up no end. So it's as basic to me as getting a electrical certificate, a gas certificate. And we've actually had older properties, I'm sure you have as well. One sticks in my mind from a couple of years ago where it actually fell through. I think it was 3 times, the house. And it was actually for a couple of, it was actually 2 different reasons why it fell through each time. But in the end, there was just too much of an unknown for people. They were just worried. The house dated back to like the 1700s, so obviously it had cracks and it had movement, and it might have looked like it'd been bowing and stuff. And at the time, the owners were going through a bad divorce, and they just wouldn't commit to this full structural survey that was going to cost them just shy of £1,000. And in the end, after the third one, you really need to get this done. I was almost on the verge of paying for it myself. Just to sort of stop all this from happening. But they did. They got the full structural. It was all fine. There were a couple of minor issues that they got sorted, and it wasn't, they had to do it, but they would have had to do it anyway, either by a reduction in the price or paying for it. And the full structural survey is what got that sale through very, very quickly the next time. And I just think being prepared with stuff like this is the best thing. So my advice would be, if you are going out to something that's a bit more rural and they're on these systems, I'd be promoting your, even if it's just a basic knowledge of it, learn a bit about this, listen to what James is saying, and I'd really promote the idea of getting it done up front.
When I started having this conversation, the counter argument was and always is, how can you trust the quality of the report from the seller? So if you're a purchaser, you're trying to empathise with the seller and their legal representatives. What date was the seller survey carried out? How do we know it's a competent firm? How can we trust their conclusions? They're all valid points. But I suppose this is what companies like mine are here to do. You know, I wrote when I first started getting this feedback, I wrote a free guide for literally anyone, homeowners, you guys, other property professionals, just to have a basic understanding of what the different systems are, how they work, what to look out for, sizing, how to interpret the regulations. I think we've issued that like 2,500 times. And it's just, as you say, it's give people a little bit of information to at least make them aware that they should be concentrating on this. And it might be okay, but it might not be. So it's that mentality of, let's include a septic tank inspection fee in our professional fee budget at the start of a transaction. It's just trying to change that mentality to, as you say, get it done as early as possible, hopefully by the seller. But if not, if the purchaser is going to pay for it, do it early.
Yeah.
And then try and, if we've got to ride the waves of bad or negative feedback off the back of that survey report, then we've created enough time to sort it out.
Do you know what?
So that's all we're trying to achieve.
You just said something, I don't know whether that's what you meant, but I don't know whether it's feasible. But did you mention a budget there? Like if a seller offered it's quite a good point. I think, like for example, if I was buying a house and the survey brings back issues, like I've done that recently. So the survey brings up issues. It might be damp. It might be that the roof has had a bit of a leak. My view personally is I would rather do that work myself, because I'd rather get the people in that I know and trust to get that work done and know it's been done properly, rather than them say, yeah, I've done it. We've had a builder around and it's Bob the builder and he's not very good. I just think that I would rather in that situation say, well, look, these issues have come up. These are the rough costs of what it's going to cost me. Let's try and renegotiate the price. I think if we flip that from what you were just saying then as well, James, and I think you're quite right. I think there would be concerns that, is it somebody that they know that's done this? Has it been signed off properly? There's a couple of things that you could push to the homeowner. One would obviously be the full transparency of the report and the company that's done it, and the full contact details, so that they can ring you and say, this has come up. Is it all right? Is it all legitimate? They can check you out. But I think actually a budget is quite a good shout. Is that what you meant? Because I just think if a vendor, it's not something you necessarily advertise, but you can have it in your back pocket to say that the vendor would potentially fund that sort of thing right from day one. Because again, I always think transparency in transactions is so valuable, and which is why I always try and say to them, get all this stuff done up front, show that you've got nothing to hide. And if the electrical report does bring up some issues, let's get it done. In the grand scheme of things, it's going to either come off your price of your work, or it's going to cause delays and problems, and it's never going to complete, and we're just going to waste time.
Well, I completely agree with you. The phrase of budget I use was it's always thrown at us when we're brought into a situation very late in the day. The purchaser will say to us, well, we had a loose budget for professional fees. We didn't know it was a septic tank serving this property. We've now got to find another £600-700 to have it done. And so whenever I speak to conveyancers or solicitors, anyone involved in a property transaction, it's like, well, if you're speaking to a purchaser, if they're thinking, I'm going to put £5,000 aside for professional fees, well, tell them to add 1,000 on worst case to get the drainage sorted out as well. Because the problem from my perspective, and I know I'm very blinkered because this is all I do, it's like we're typically an afterthought. We're therefore an expense that people didn't think about or know about or don't want to pay. So with that, immediately is negativity. They think we're going to find problems. They think we're going to cause delays. They think we're going to cause cost. And it's like, well, we might do, but we might not. So again, I know I sound like a broken record, but mentality, get us involved early, put us in your budget from a professional fee expenditure perspective. and then let's ride the waves of whatever the inspection finds. And this, fingers crossed, hope it's okay. More times than not, it's not going to be okay, which is, again, it's not scaremongering, it's just reality. A very high proportion. 80% of what we see have issues. They don't need full system replacements, but they'll need things, even if it's a few £100 for new manhole covers because they're rusted and very unsafe. Or it might be the other end of the scale and the whole system needs to be replaced. And it goes on third-party land because the boundaries have changed over the decades. So then we're talking about easements. We're talking about an unhappy third-party owner. So you're into the realms of dispute resolution. But that's what we do. So, and again, yes, we're talking about property transactions. We do insurance claim validation, expert witness work, dispute resolution, compliance surveys. So we're not just septic tanks as in look at a tank. It's like, okay, well, who's the client? Why do we need to look at it? What is the problem? We need to track back, look at the history, look at the regs, look at the property boundaries changing. And then there will always be a solution to every issue. But the more bespoke and the smaller the footprint, the more expensive it's going to get. So again, it all comes back to introduce us as early as possible, so we've got enough time to come up with a solution.
Just want to touch on that quickly. In terms of costs, I'm asking you for a range here, but I'm just it's nice to have almost, I suppose, anecdotal things from the horse's mouth, so to speak. So if I'm going to, a manhole you sort of mentioned was, a couple of £100. But, are we talking for a whole system replacement? It would be, 10, 15, 20 grand. I appreciate it's a little bit how long is a piece of string, but...
15 to 20 is always the range that I use. And I know, I appreciate it's quite a large range, but it all depends on depth of the excavation, access issues, if there's any rainwater cross connections, the size of the plant, where it's going. There's lots of different factors, but 15 to 20 is a realistic range to manage expectations.
I don't actually think that's horrific either, I'd have expected, when you say something like that, it sounds just, oh my goodness, that is utterly horrific. It's going to cost, multiple tens of thousands. That's what it sounds like, the job. But actually, again, we're talking grand scheme of things. If you were selling a £200,000 terraced property that somehow had a septic tank, which is not going to happen, obviously, but that all of a sudden becomes an enormous cost. But if you're selling a 1.5 million barn and you're saying the whole system needs replaced, it's going to be 20 grand. There's not a lot of people I think could be like, I don't know.
No, it depends on their scenario. If they're, divorced, no money, both lost their jobs, then different story. But in the main, the premium end of the market, 15 grand is 15 grand, isn't it? It kind of is what it is. I want to ask you a question. I suppose it's in the back of my mind. What is the most dangerous thing that you've seen, like in terms of like sewage treatment plants, etc.? Like what's the most dangerous thing you could come across, or people maybe that are, maybe people wouldn't expect, and doesn't come up until a house is surveyed or sold?
Oh, that's a good question. The biggest danger, and it probably isn't the answer you're expecting, the biggest danger is if a system's been installed incorrectly.
Yeah.
And
how common is that, would you say?
Very common.
Right.
Very common, because specifically since 2015, so more and more people, the further we've come away from 15, the greater the awareness.
Yeah.
So in a scenario, again, I'll use this scenario of a property transaction. The seller's been proactive, had a check, got a non-compliant system. It should have cost 15 to 20. They've got one stuck in the ground for 8 grand. Like, how is that even possible? Yeah. And then you work out it's not a competent contractor. There's no concrete backfill. It's granular, so it could easily shift. They haven't applied to the EA for a permit, whereas the scenario it should have been. There's no engagement with building control, so there's no completion certificate. There's no evidence it's been installed correctly. And funny enough, the bloody thing started to shift and pop. So then not only have you got to pay to get a new system installed, you've got to pay to decommission that first one. And if you haven't got much footprint, you've got to rip out the first one, keep the property online with some sort of clever over pumping because you're using the same footprint for the new install. So suddenly you're doubling the cost of that job after they've already paid out 8 grand for a crap job. So that is the biggest danger. It is people trying to get a quick buck by saying, yes, I've got a ticket to drive a digger, therefore I can install you a treatment plant. It is not that straightforward. So the danger is, an incompetent installation.
And what is that, like a health danger as well, I guess? Like what would happen in that scenario?
In that scenario, well, if the system hasn't been put in level, then the treatment system won't work inside it. So that's the first thing. A lot of these systems, even though they come with a big sticker saying in and out, a lot of these systems are installed back to front, which means the levels are wrong. So it's got a surcharge before it escapes. They might be discharging to a soakaway arrangement that isn't compliant with regulations because they've done it on the cheap.
Yeah.
They might have tapped into a watercourse that is just over the boundary line, so there should be a legal easement, but they've just done it because it was just a metre of pipe work. So, the dangers are that the system won't work, that you're going to upset a neighbour, that it's going to be a pollution event, that you've got to have that completely reinstalled at double the cost. So that they are the real dangers.
So I've got two more questions. I don't know, Dave, if you've got any that you want to fire in, but two more questions I've got are... So, a lot of the time when I go and see a seller, they've got like an extension, they've got electric works done, they've had replacement windows, etc. I always ask them to have those certificates ready, like, for example, your fencer, your EICR, gas safe, etc. What paperwork should a seller have ready from your point of view, like from an off-main solutions point of view?
Well, I know I sound boring. I go back to the government website and the general binding rules, and it stipulates the seller must have paperwork, if it's still available, of course, for the installation. So we're looking for a completion. If the system was installed when the property was built, it will be done under full planning.
Yeah.
If it's been a retro installation, there should be a completion certificate from building control. Then we're looking for evidence of emptying history if it's a septic tank.
Yeah.
So we want regular. Everyone says annually. If you've only got one person in a house, every 2 or 3 years is fine, but you want that evidence to show it's been regularly emptied.
Yeah.
If it's a sewage treatment plant, you want evidence that it's been serviced annually. And it has to be. There's absolutely no excuse. It has to be annual. That's not only to make sure it works correctly, but also to make sure the manufacturer's warranty remains valid. Fine. They're normally 20 to 25-year life warranties. If you miss one service, the whole warranty is dead. So
that was going to be another question, actually. I was going to ask. I've offered another question was, what's generally the lifespan of each of these things? Because, a lot of times you can go to a house and they go, oh, I've had a cesspit, mate. It's been there for 2,500 years. But how long do they generally last? I know it's a little bit how long is a piece of string, but...
That is a tricky one. We go to old, beautifully built brick septic tanks that are 80, 90 years old. There's not a single bit of movement on it. It's been installed amazing. It's going to a soakaway that wouldn't adhere to current regs, but it's still working because the ground is excellent at dissipating the water. That will probably have another 20, 30, 40 years life. The new systems installed are not brickwork. They're mostly glass reinforced plastic or similar materials. They should easily last 50 years. But the manufacturer's life warranty will max out at 25, the most at 20. But the tank itself, if it's discharging to ground, the soakaway arrangement might well need to be replaced once or twice before the asset itself dies. Yeah. So that's why it's always important when you're looking at the soakaway or a drainage field installation. The British standard that tells you about drainage fields says that when you're installing one, there should always be sufficient room to install a second one when the first one fails. And that you're not going to get any specific references in timeframes, but a drainage field, you should get 20 to 30 years life out of that.
And you mentioned earlier a guide. Do you still have that guide handy, like the PDF?
It's on the homepage of our website. It's a free download, or I can email it for distribution. Yeah, it's there for everyone and anyone to take a look.
Do you want to give your website a plug and who you are, so people can access that? Because I think that would be really handy. Because my last question was going to be, what your view is on how agents can educate themselves and, the resources and training to become I suppose, au fait with almost what they're talking. We're not experts, of course we're not, but I think that guide would be really useful, and I think it'd also be a really good plug for obviously appreciate you giving up your time for us today and the listeners, but somewhere for people to go and educate themselves on your guide.
Well, it's funny you say that, and thank you very much. I wanted to say thank you. I know it sounds a bit corny, but when I do things like this, when I do CPD, training events, any exhibition work, it's a fantastic opportunity for me to talk to the very people that have got the ability to influence a smooth introduction of a off-mains drainage system and how it needs to be surveyed and what the complications might be. So thank you very much for this opportunity to get the word out there. But certainly, as a bit of a punt on mine, it's offmainsolutions.co.uk. The free guide is on the homepage, but also what we've done is tried to make the general binding rules more easy to understand. So I know it sounds daft, but we've taken it from the government website, put it into a basic Excel document and created like a tick list for, again, anyone to use to go through it, and hopefully makes, on the government website, it's not complicated, but it's just a bit cumbersome. So in an Excel doc, everyone's used to Excel. You literally look at the list, tick or exit. It's really straightforward. And for conveyancers, we've created a private drainage questionnaire, because in the space of a month, this is going back years, 6 different solicitors said, can you look at our in-house questionnaires? And I tweaked all 6 and I thought, well, why have I done that? So I just created like a master list and then just issued that as well. So it's literally anything to bring awareness to minimise the possibility of a 11th hour issue, or worse than that, customer moves in, they've taken a punt, didn't get the survey done, and the last one they want to do, a month in, have a collapsed system or a broken system, and then they've got to find 20 grand, and they've missed that opportunity to renegotiate during the transaction process.
Dave, do you have any other questions?
It's probably an obvious one for me. I was just going to say before, and I think it's really obvious, but I think if there are problems with the systems, it is, from your experience, James, I'm assuming, it's affected mortgageability as well on properties, and it can invalidate insurances, I'm sure, as well.
Yeah. We've just very, very recently, within the last 18 months, we're being forwarded emails from the lenders, and it's them that are driving. Lenders want a compliance certificate to demonstrate the system's compliant. There is no such thing. I keep seeing this banded around on the bloody internet. There is no such thing as a compliance certificate. You can have a completion certificate from builder control for the installation. You can have a compliance report from like a company like mine, but there is no such thing as a compliance certificate. So I know it sounds a bit petty, but that needs to, either one needs to be created or people need to stop talking about it, because it causes confusion. One does not exist. Yeah.
We had a couple of questions from our members actually in the group that maybe I didn't cover, and apologies if you've covered it already, but I just wanted to directly cover this as well. So Lou has asked how often a septic tank should be emptied, as there seems to be 2 schools of thought. That was asked by Kate actually as well. She seconded that.
Every single publication and manufacturer will say once a year for septic tanks.
Yeah.
And that's if a property is fully occupied, it should be empty once a year. If you're in a scenario where you've got an individual, literally one person in a property, that emptying interval could go, literally, you could do it once every 3 years. Because I know this is a bit gross. It's all to do with that sludge layer. When a vacuum tanker comes out to empty a septic tank and the hose goes in, the engineer whacks on the vacuum and he sucks out all the contents. We don't really care about the majority of it, which is the middle bit. Obviously, it gets sucked away. What we care about is the sludge at the bottom being removed. Because what we don't want to happen is have a fully occupied property that doesn't empty a septic tank for 20, 30 years, which is often the case. All that happens is that sludge layer builds and builds and builds and creates a fake bottom of the septic tank. And when that happens, you reduce the capacity above it for the natural separation process to occur. And when that happens, you are literally pushing through unseparated waste into the ground, or more worryingly, if it's illegally connected to a waterway, you're going to be polluting that straight away. So regular emptying is what you want, and foul safe once a year. But in the real world, if you've got low occupants, you can stretch that out. As long as it's regular and you're removing that sludge layer, that's the main thing. That's what's important.
Yeah, perfect. And then there was another question. So I don't know whether you'll know the answer to this, but we're going to ask it anyway. Just sort of another question about funding schemes available for homeowners to upgrade sewage treatment plants. To upgrade upgrade to sewage treatment plants?
The only schemes that I'm aware of right now are the phosphate reduction, which is the big hitter at the moment, which is the nutrient neutrality scheme. So at the moment, 28 local authorities are running them at various stages. Some haven't gone live yet, but that's where in a certain geography within the umbrella of a local authority, if you have an off-mains drainage system, you can apply. And if you're lucky, you'll be accepted into the scheme and you will get a free of charge new sewage treatment plant.
Excellent. That's worthwhile. Now, there you go, Lou. So Lou and Kate questions have been answered. Dave, anything else to add in before we bid this man good day?
I just think it's been really eye-opening, honestly. I've downloaded your guide while you were on then. And,
brilliant.
I've speed read it so quick. It's just pulled out loads of things. I've not used ChatGPT at all to get any
Definitely not.
points. But I just think some of the things that I now know in this sort of 30 minutes is really going to help me on my valuations and stuff. But I know we've gone through some of this today, but just pulling up some of the key stats, the thing that really stands out for me is like the rainwater cross connections thing that you mentioned.
Yeah,
35%. It says 35% of those have rainwater cross connections. 4% of properties that are off mains drainage, which I think is way high. If you'd said to me, offer a percentage, how many you think, I'd have probably gone quite low because I just thought, well, obviously it's illegal, so it's I'd have gone maybe 5% or something like that.
Yeah.
35% is ridiculous, and I think just looking at those stats, it immediately goes back to what I've been quite passionate about on this, about just getting the info up front and trying to get your clients to have these surveys done or be aware that it's probably going to come up. And as you said, cost of budget and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I just think it's been extremely interesting. And I think if you've not got the guide, anybody listening to it, I would download it. I've just done it now. I've popped it in our group. We'll probably pop it in for the members as well. I think it's a really worthwhile read. And if you're selling a lot of these types of properties, I'd just become a sort of not so much an expert on it, but just know the absolute basics so you know what you're talking about, because it'll separate you from your competition, that you have this knowledge. I always think take these little nuggets away, and it will separate. I had one the other week where I've got this farmhouse and the homeowner was showing us around at the same time. He was there when we arrived, so he was just answering some questions to the buyers, and he was talking about how many bales of hay this summer cut would give, and I had absolutely no idea at all. And I was just like nodding along when 60 bales of hay, that'll do about 60 bales of hay, and then the second cut will be 30 bales of hay. That's what he was saying, right? And I had 2 viewings there that day, and he was telling these guys about it, and I was just sort of nodding along. And then they did the viewing, we did the viewing, they left. Then my second viewers arrived. and the homeowner wasn't there. Yeah, the homeowner wasn't there for the second one. He'd gone at this point. So when we got to this field, and I was like, so this field's great. I mean, this time of year you'll probably get 60 bales of hay, and off the second cut 30 bales of hay. And they go, yeah, thanks, Dave. Yeah, that sounds really great. And they genuinely thought he knows his stuff. This guy, and I'd learned it about 15 minutes ago. And I just think that even with this sort of stuff now, I am 100% going to take this guide with me to any appointment that I have like that. I'll happily share it because I'm no expert at all. But it's just another value add. And knowing some of those basic things, I think, just knowledgeable things that you can use in your valuation, if you're selling this type of home, will set you apart, because they'll know that you've done your research and they'll want somebody that knows what they're talking about. So I just think it's been very, very interesting, and I thank you for coming on, James. I think it's been great.
No, I appreciate the invite. Thank you very much indeed.
So I think we should give you a little bit of plug. offmainsolutions.co.uk. You're a LinkedIn professional as well, aren't you, James? You love LinkedIn like me. How do people find you on LinkedIn?
How do they find me?
Type in his name on LinkedIn,
accident, and then they regret it instantly. But I'm a massive fan of LinkedIn, not only because of the awareness, but suddenly it's almost as if the penny's dropped, and we now get a very decent amount of referrals through LinkedIn for this sort of thing, the surveys for property transactions. So it's working out.
You're very active on there as well. And I know we've talked obviously about your business and what you do here, but one of the things we do preach to our members and listeners as well is, activity on social media. I must admit, I'm not as active this year as I've been last year because I've just been so busy. But I still stay relatively active and present on LinkedIn, and I just think that it's so underutilized, the platform. In terms of business to business and even business to consumer on there, because there's a lot of high level people that are on LinkedIn that have premium homes, that own businesses. It's a very kind of entrepreneurial space, and if they haven't connected with you, if they do listen to this podcast, James Warren on LinkedIn, Off Main Solutions, and if you've got any Off Main Solutions queries or surveys, then reach out to James. He's your man.
James, just a quick. Obviously, I'm up in the north. JK's down in the south. Where do you cover?
We cover everywhere. But sometimes we have to introduce our partner contractors if it's a touch too far or we're too busy and we can't get out in a time frame that we feel is acceptable. But in those scenarios, we can either babysit the whole process or we can literally introduce that customer directly to the local partner.
Perfect. That's great. Right.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
We'll call it a day, and we'll see you all next week.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you ever so much. Cheers, gents.